All right, are we all back? It's hard to tell when we've got our cameras off. That's the downside of cameras off. One of them. Okay, let's get started so we don't get behind. And our next presenters is a group of 3 from Udmurt State in Ijevsk, Russia, and that is Elena Frolicheva. Did I pronounce your name right, Elena?
Frolicheva. Yes.
Okay. I'll just use
very close.
Tamara and Ekaterina. So we are looking forward to hearing you speak.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Cynthia, for giving this opportunity to participate in this symposium. It's really an honor for us to take part in it. And today I have a presentation, the work of our team. So it's a work of Ekaterina Goldobina, Tamara Kazimirovna, and I'm as a part of this team. So, and I've prepared a little presentation about our work, and I would like to ask you to turn it on, because I think I'm not able to manage that.
Yes, I will turn it on, and you just let me know when to move forward in the slide.
Okay. Okay. Well, I can start, and after that, Cynthia will help me with presentation. So our work is, concern as teaching legal English to Russian students across borders. In my presentation, I'm going to talk about experience of teaching legal English for law Russian students within the elective training course for lawyers translators, using IT technologies and online real-life communication. Over a decade, I don't know, can I move the slides? No? Cynthia, could you help me with remove? Yes, and the next slide, please. Oh, thanks. So over a decade, we have been cooperated with University of Illinois by sessions, lectures, online, and I would like to sum up some results which we exceeded. Under this cooperation, we had sessions, lectures online on the regular basis by the Zoom, once per week, about 1 hour. This time include 30 minutes topic speech concerning different fields of law or problems of law presented by speaker. The rest of the time we discussed the topic with volunteer and students could ask questions. In this way, IT technologies have made it possible to integrate and develop the essential language and professional skills via online communication with foreign lawyers and universities. Our teaching methodology has been changed thanks to the new opportunities and challenges that we are facing now. Actually, thanks to the international long-term cooperation, we were ready to survive in this difficult pandemic time. That's why it's an honor for me to present this way of online real-life communication through different universities. We consider it as an instrument for professional communication and ability to apply theoretical skills in practice, and as motivation for students to study legal English, legal systems of other countries, and international law. So we focus on developing such professional competences as legal English and law proficiency, communicative ability, and cross-cultural awareness. Could you turn the next slide, please? Yes, here, for example, you can see the pictures from these sessions. And so here the students, for example, the speaker, the teacher of university, Illinois University, and the master or postgraduate student also present the lecture to our students from Russia. Could you turn the next slide? Yes, here the professional skills, and next one. I would like to talk about the difficulties, obstacles, or challenges which we had through this cooperation work. So the different ways of teaching, for example, methodology, for example, from the general to the specific. In foreign countries like in USA, they start the methodology from the specific, and after that come to the general. In Russian methodology, it's totally round. It's come from the general and after that to specific. And the same as concerning the theory and practice. So usually we study more theory as like legal base, and after that we go to practice. So that's the differences in teaching methodology, make some differences and obstacles for our students. Also, it's language difficulties, it's cultural difficulties, psychological difficulties, also different mentality. For example, our students used to work in a group, like it's a group nation. I just made it individual group nation. Lack of communication with foreigners. It's also obstacles for the students. Plus fears to ask questions, to look stupid, to fail to understand, to make mistakes. So it's also all of this make difficulties for students to communicate. On the next slide, you can see, for example, Cynthia, could you turn the slide on the 8 to the next? Okay, on the next slide, I've prepared all the cooperation, what we made. This way of teamwork helped to overcome the mentioned difficulties. And after the session, the Russian professor could discuss the topic to make it understandable for the group. For example, as you see before on the pictures, the group of students was staying because they have a group in the room and they have communication with the speaker. So we have opportunity to discuss what have been said during the session. And thanks to the international long-term cooperation with South Illinois Law School, our students have the unique opportunity not only to improve the command of legal English, but to acquire basic knowledge of the USA legal system and universal practical skills of advocacy. And coming to sum up what was said, it was the first time when our students were to give feedback and demonstrate their accurate skills. It has been proven that online teaching may be effective both in lecturing and interactive forums. IT technologies let teachers not only survive in this time of global collapse, but to revise and update teaching methodology. Accurate advantages of different teaching methodologies through international educational cooperation. Well, I've tried to be very fast and short, but that's all what I wanted to say, that we were actually, by this cooperation over the decade which we had with Illinois University, we were prepared for this time of pandemic. So thank you for your cooperation with our Udmurt State University. It's really honor for us.
And let me
okay.
add, Lena.
Yes.
So, we'd like to take this chance, this opportunity to express our gratitude to Illinois University, to law school for this chance, for this program that we were involved in for many, many years. So, and we have special reasons, well, to express our gratitude. So one of them is certainly, as my colleague and I, so we are not lawyers, we teach English. We teach English for law students. So, and it's really a great chance for our students to be motivated to deepen their knowledge, to give the profound knowledge, not only of English, but of legal English as well. And you know how excited our students are, and we are, well, my colleagues and I, when all these things that we teach in our classroom, they learn just firsthand from lawyers, from lecturers of your university. And so it is just, it's a first-hand experience. They get first-hand experience, not through the textbooks or videos that we provide them in the classroom. Well, and so this chance that our students had participating in this moot court competition, it was just unbelievable for us, because it was like, so we didn't even dare to think of it. It was just like a top on the cherry on the top. Yes, right. And you know, our students take part in these moot court competitions in Russia. So in Moscow, it used to be taken regularly, but not last year, right? Because of the situation.
Last year's, yeah, because of.
And one more thing. So we've used to all these video conferences that you have with our students. And when this collapse happened and we were just on this lockdown, it wasn't a problem. Really, it wasn't a problem for us just to change the place of teaching, to change our classrooms in university to this particular room. Yeah. So in contrast, maybe to other professors from our university, I mean, not foreign language teachers, but some other subjects. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Lena, for your help. You know that Lena, she's my former student of English, you know, and I'm proud of having such a
brilliant student.
Yes, such a student. Yes, because now you probably don't know, she's a federal judge in Russia, and nevertheless, she continued to help us with her work. Yeah, and so we can call it like a charity work for her, just her, teaching our students. She continued doing it. So thank you, Lena, very much for your help.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you noticed I got kicked off during that presentation. So now I'm using my hotspot and hopefully my internet will come back on. So I'm sorry that the slideshow got dropped, and hopefully we'll be able to distribute those slides to everybody a little bit later so that you can see the slides that were missed. And I apologize for my own technical problems. This week, for some reason, our internet has decided to act crazy. So thank you very much for that presentation. Our next presentation is, there's my camera, is Nkatha Kabira and Sarah Kinyanjui. And I'm not sure if I pronounced your names right, so I hope you'll correct me when you begin speaking. Are you here? Yeah,
yes.
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll just put up the slideshow to make sure everything's good. Then I'll. So thank you very much for this opportunity. We are very excited to participate in this forum. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And yes, you did pronounce our names correctly. The title of our presentation today is Decolonizing Legal Pedagogy and Praxis, Lessons on e-learning from the COVID-19 Adaptation. In his famous book, Arrow of God, critically acclaimed author and novelist Chinua Achebe refers to an African proverb which goes like this. Eneke, the bird, says that since men have learned to shoot without missing, he has learned to fly without perching. The meaning of this African proverb is that people change depending on the circumstances. You also change to adjust yourself, and that's what societies do. This is exactly what the pandemic has forced us to reckon with. We have had to change our ways of thinking, our ways of learning, our ways of teaching. And in this presentation, we make two main arguments. The first argument is that although Kenya, like many other East African countries, has been independent from their colonial masters for more than 50 years, nevertheless, universities continue to rely on traditional pedagogical approaches, which more often than not fail to capture the lived realities. We demonstrate that this is because the research and teaching curricula of most disciplines, including legal pedagogy, is still informed by Eurocentric epistemologies. The second argument is that the challenges that we experienced during the pandemic have given way to progressive adoption of innovative pedagogies and praxis, and thus paving way for transformative legal education. In our presentation, we will highlight 9 key lessons from Kenya's experience with the COVID-19 adaptation. So we'll do that in order to decolonize the art and science of legal pedagogy and praxis. The presentation comes in 2 parts. In the first part, we will discuss the traditional pedagogical approaches. And in the second part, we will discuss innovative pedagogies and praxis. In the second part, Dr. Kinyanjui will take us through that. So let's talk about the first part, the traditional pedagogical approaches. Traditionally, the role of the teacher was to transmit knowledge, to tell and retell facts. He or she was always the expert. In terms of knowledge, the goal was to accumulate facts. The role of the student, on the other hand, was to be the passive recipient of knowledge and information. The learning process was about transmission of knowledge and information, and the classroom activities were teacher-centered and didactic, characterized by fear and trembling, and very little interaction between the students and the teacher. The learning design was instructional. It was a lecture style, focused on memorizing, recalling, regurgitating what the teacher said. This approach certainly had its limitations, as it was built and continued a colonial heritage that focused on repeating legal knowledge that was based on British colonial legal history and legal thought. As a result, for the most part, legal education in Kenya has remained a one-dimensional discipline that is trapped in a colonial past and very removed from socio-economic and political realities. The pandemic and the shift to online learning created an opportunity to rethink, to reflect, and to retell Kenya's legal history and to question knowledge that we had for far too long held near and dear. It presented an opportunity to decolonize legal knowledge. By decolonizing, we are specifically referring to what Ngugi wa Thiong'o describes as decolonizing the mind. In essence, for us, decolonizing legal pedagogy entails liberating the mind of the learner through innovative, creative, and critical thinking. Decolonizing legal pedagogy also entails moving beyond the traditional lecture style of knowledge transmission that focuses on descriptive learning and very little critical engagement. It entails breaking down the boundaries of law and moving towards interdisciplinary worldviews that recognize, celebrate, and utilize African sources of knowledge, such as stories, proverbs, songs, poems, which have been passed down from generation to generation. I loved hearing my students express themselves through poetry, through song, and through storytelling, which we engaged in our legal research and writing class, as I had them in Zoom breakout rooms. It also entails, as we are discussing today, breaking down physical barriers and boundaries. It also entails embodying the great African philosophy, I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. This entails collaborative knowledge generation rather than individualistic knowledge generation. Let us now turn to the second part of our presentation. Over to you, Dr. Kinyanjui.
Thank you, Dr. Nkatha. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit us, we were forced to introspect on our teaching as we were stepping out of our norm. In Foucault, the French philosopher's terms, this has been a moment in which mentalities have shifted. And we'd like to talk about this process, which has provided lessons and which has led to transitions that we'd like to talk about in 9 points. Point number 1, from lectures to active learning. Well, the impact of traditional lectures vis-a-vis active learning is best illustrated through a study done which revealed that 67% of the students during lectures have thoughts on simple comprehension, they have passive thoughts, they have irrelevant thoughts, and that students predominantly lectured are 1.5 more times likely to fail than active students. And so for us, this provided food for thought, which is captured in three ways of thinking. One, that if the objective is to nurture critical thinkers, then traditional lectures are not ideal. But secondly, in a period or in a time when information is available digitally, then you cannot just proceed with traditional lectures as students can get this information. And thirdly, active learning enhances concentration. Point number 2, from disengagement to engagement. When teaching online, students are easily disengaged for many reasons, but that reality really illuminated overall disengagement of law students. And we began asking ourselves, are law students engaged with the very essence of the legal professions, or are they not? Does legal education as we deliver it inspire students to excel and to be agents of positive change? Does legal education inspire our students to be active rather than passive students? And does legal education inspire thinkers and innovators? And on this one, we partnered with an American company, Adventure, and Facebook, and they funded our students to come up with a project that would change cultures, or for culture change. And one of our students came up with an online project in which he is offering legal aid online. So do we have more of this, or is this just an isolated case? We also asked ourselves, do law institutions nurture versatile individuals? When the pandemic hit, the judiciary began digitizing, but there was a lot of resistance by lawyers. And so the question, is this a product of our legal education? Are our institutions grounded with a framework of care? Are we concerned about our students? Point number 3, from rigidity to innovation. And I've mentioned this, but also innovation in terms of the way that we teach. And as Nkatha has already said, that during this time, we began exploring different forms of delivery. And technology provided these opportunities for us. For instance, requiring students to write moderated blog posts, holding moot courts and model United Nations online, free writing and narrative writing online, but also having fun activity like Kahoots being used for teaching. The point is not a one size fits all, but basically go out of the box and be creative. Number 4, from disciplinarity to inter and multidisciplinary learning. So traditionally, as Nkatha has said, legal education has been one-dimensional, yet we can benefit a lot from other disciplines. And during the pandemic, this opened our eyes, but also provided opportunities for us to collaborate and innovate across disciplines. Number 5, from local to global and global to local. As already has been talked about throughout this symposium, there is value in global and local partnerships. They enhance legal education, and the digital space enabled us to develop global partnerships that are mutually beneficial. Professor Chris, Behan, and I interchange. I taught his class, he taught my class, and our students really enjoyed it. And as Prof. Cindy has also said, our students have been taking part in a moot court competition together. So that is value addition in legal education. The other point on this is that it also enables us to deconstruct traditional power centers through technology. Internally, the University of Nairobi, 3 campuses, Kisumu, Mombasa, and Nairobi, began teaching together. And this was different from the traditional, where Parkland's campus is the mother campus and the source of knowledge. So this was a good opportunity for us. Number 6, from prescriptive learning and cramming to critical engagement and dialogue on legal education. Of course, as we have heard in the symposium, that of course there are points that students need to memorize, to recall. They need to know the basic concepts. However, there is need for them to rise beyond that, but be also able to produce knowledge to justify a stand or decision. And online learning especially demands or nurtures higher level thinking, obviously, because even how you test students, the testing requires application. You cannot ask recalling questions, online exams, where then they're taking away the exams. Number 7, from technology as a barrier to technology as an enabler. At the beginning of the pandemic, we saw technology as a barrier. But as we went along, we saw it as an enabler as we dealt with the challenges. The point is that technology is a means to an end. It facilitates engaging and effective teaching and learning. However, it's worth to bear in mind that it is a tool of engagement and it cannot replace the experts. It cannot replace the personal engagement with the lecturer. Number 8, from teacher-centered learning to learner-centered, what we would call flipped classrooms. And Nkatha has already talked about the spirit of Ubuntu, that the classroom setting has now become a space for not just individualistic receiving of knowledge, but collaborative knowledge production. Students will learn, of course, online. They will get online materials, they will have read it. And when they come to class, we share what we already know. So this has been a great opportunity for better participation. Number 9, from benchmarking to context-specific learning. One of the things that we have learned is that we must appreciate local and homegrown solutions to innovative legal education. And this speaks to what we have called decolonizing legal education. That in as much as there's a lot to learn from other global or other jurisdictions, there is value also in appreciating our context-specific challenges. A lot has been said, for instance, about students turning off cameras, difficulty in calling on students, difficulty in ascertaining who is present. But we have had to come up with our own ways of dealing with our challenges. For instance, in our institution, we had to partner with one of the mobile phone companies to provide bundles for students so as to enable them to attend classes. In conclusion, post-COVID, what does this tell us? That post-COVID, the forced introspection and opportunities should not be in vain. We need to retain the gains. What we are doing this evening for us and morning for you should not be lost. There should be a growing and a continuous conversation and we need to sustain this conversation. Technology, as I've said, is a tool of engagement, not the engagement itself. We need to get the engagement right as we have introspected, and then let technology facilitate the engagement. And in conclusion, like Eneke, the African bird, we as educators must learn to fly without perching and adapt to innovative and transformative pedagogy. Thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity to present this evening for us and morning for you.
Thank you very much. That was great. I liked that poem a lot. Our next presenter is Diane Penneys Edelman, who is a professor at Villanova. There she is.
Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to see you, and in a moment I'll turn off my screen so that I can show you my PowerPoint. I'm delighted to have followed that last presentation talking about engagement and learning to fly, because I think I share in that experience and hope to share that with you as well. So I'm going to share my slides, and Cynthia, if you would kindly tell me whether the correct, one moment.
Yes, that looks like the correct version.
Okay, one moment. Oops, that's not correct.
No, that's not the correct version.
Okay, one moment while I set up the screen share. Sorry about that. I need to stop it for a moment. Sorry. Okay. All right.
That looks right.
Thank you so much for part of that engagement also.
We can't hear you very well. That's better.
Trying to close my.
I hear street noises and not your voice.
The street noises are not here.
Oh.
From someone else.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Anyhow, thank you all for your patience. So what I'd like to talk to you about today are keeping it going. And as you see, my title is How to Keep It Going, Continuing to Innovate Beyond the Pandemic. So I'm going to talk about different ways of connecting, different ways of continuing to innovate along the way, both in group ways and in individual ways, both ways that we can have our students be more connected during this time and afterwards, and also how we as academics can do that, because that's crucial as well. We don't know how long the pandemic will last. We know that it can't last forever, but we are coming up with ways, as everyone has spoken about this morning, of innovating beyond when this takes place. So the first thing I wanted to mention to you were some of these great conferences. The SEALS, the Southeastern Association of Law Schools, met for the first time online last August instead of in the Southeastern United States. And I have a great story that springs from that I'll tell you in another slide or two from now. The Association of American Law Schools, the meeting of all American law schools and some schools abroad that takes place every January, was entirely online this January. And it enabled people to attend all sorts of very well organized programs and to socialize as we are doing during some of our breaks as well. The International Law section of the American Bar Association is having its first fully virtual conference this coming weekend, this Wednesday through Friday. And I've provided links for everyone. I'm happy to send the slides afterward, unless Cynthia is doing that. And at the same time as we're speaking now, concurrently, the International Legal Education Abroad group is meeting yesterday afternoon, this past Wednesday afternoon, and this afternoon to share innovative ideas for teaching internationally in different ways. And so I encourage you, don't be discouraged by conferences being virtual. Obviously, you're not because you're here today, but continue to explore them. And I'll tell you about some unusual ones and opportunities in a minute. So keeping it going by connecting is something that we can do whether we're live at conferences or virtually. I'm sure that some of us who are meeting today, who are meeting for the first time, will learn of connections and will deepen our connections with those whom we've known already. Keeping it going by helping and creating. Here, where does collaboration begin? It begins with people you know, through friends of friends, through people you meet at conferences, whether they're live or online. All of these great conferences are wonderful to meet. And let me tell you this story now. In SEALS in August 2020, it was the first time again that SEALS became virtual. I attended from Philadelphia. It was supposed to be in Florida. And as I attended various legal education oriented programs, I met Professor Melanie Reed of Duncan Law School at Lincoln Memorial University in Knoxville, Tennessee, some 600 miles away from me. Now, Melanie has been a leader in the American Bar Association Rule of Law Initiative for several years. And hopefully many of you out there know about ROLI. I know some of you are active participants in it. And you may know about it even if you're based abroad because it works all around the world. In any event, when we met last summer, Melanie Reed was about to teach a unique comparative legal traditions course at her school in Tennessee, in which she was going to teach her students alongside students from Bosnia-Herzegovina, countries formed from the former Yugoslavia. Participating in her course as well were going to be guest lecturers from Bosnia and Herzegovina, guest speakers as far as St. Louis, including Ira Traco, who's online with us today from St. Louis, and Pennsylvania, some colleagues of mine, and of course, speakers from around the world. And there were lecturers on subject expertise as well. In this spring semester, her course was going to connect Duncan students with students from the same area again, as well as students from South America and elsewhere. The goal of the project was to assist Bosnia-Herzegovina in revising its criminal procedure codes. And via Zoom, I was able to attend this class virtually and hopefully absorb ideas and the creativity that I hope will enable me to create courses like this and could enable you to do so as well. The students were matched up with students from abroad. They worked together to make presentations on topics like bail, on topics like rights when you're arrested and all that sort of thing. And they learned from each other consistently, and everyone learned from this group. So that's kind of a big way of bringing the world into your classroom. And there are other ways as well, individual projects that you can work on through the Rule of Law Initiative. So for example, you'll hear later today from one of the people present now, Christopher Kelly, professor from University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and Professor Bob Lutz of Southwestern Law. They're experienced with ROLI and invited me to join them in teaching 2 seminars remotely in Moldova earlier this year to professors and deans interested in developing skills programs. Christopher and I are continuing to work with ROLI over there on different projects. And soon I'm also going to be working with ROLI in Uzbekistan on integrating skills teaching into doctrinal courses. And this is all without leaving home. So while it will be great to work with Roli partners in person, which you can do when there are not travel restrictions, it's fantastic to be able to carry out this virtual work while we can't travel. The other thing is this is pro bono work. So it enables you to do good without, and to be creative in doing it without leaving home, without being able to travel. I mentioned this slide also, University of Miami's Law Without Walls, and provide you with the link. It's a unique program that promotes entrepreneurship and all sorts of legal collaboration without walls with partner schools from all over the world. And I urge you to look at it because it's very complicated but fascinating to read about. Let me get my next slide, one moment. Okay, continuing creative connections beyond the pandemic. It's something that we have all been talking about. So among these opportunities, many of you have heard of the Jessup International Moot Court Competition. We heard first from Cynthia about this unique international team for the Nuremberg competition that she helped to develop and work with. Well, the Jessup, which has been involves students from all over the world, has been entirely virtual this year. Perhaps you have judged in it. I judged at 3 rounds. I was happy to be able to do them during normal hours and not in the middle of the night. But because we have all different calendars, people have been judging all throughout the hours to do this. I urge you also to consider other opportunities to teach across boundaries. You've heard from a number of our colleagues in Russia today. I also had the opportunity to teach oral argument physically in Russia at the Pericles Law Center, which is linked here. But sometimes Pericles reaches out to see if you can judge rounds remotely or judge briefs remotely. So it's another way that you can contribute from a distance. I encourage you to get involved with the ABA's International Legal Education Committee, which is here. There are several people present today. In fact, it's how I first got to know Professor Fountaine. And Dean Bill Johnson, you heard from, is a past chair. Ira Traco and Christopher Kelly, who are on today, are also co-chairs. And it's a great way to get involved in these efforts. Participate in online conferences. This year, in the midst of this pandemic, these 3 law schools held an 8-day transnational conference on the future of legal education. I had the privilege of moderating in that conference, and the first person I moderated for in the morning was from the Supreme Court of Bangladesh. And there were professors from all over the world who participated. So if you're interested in these kinds of opportunities, network, find out the links and those sorts of things. And let me just finish up with 1 or 2 more slides. And so silver linings of the pandemic. There are so many, and you've heard about a number of them today. Use creativity and resourcefulness to connect with others. Connect with people you meet today, or use the ideas that people have presented today in order to develop and work on continuing projects in ways that can last whether we can practice or not. Think about these other kinds of benefits. We're not only avoiding illness by not traveling now, but we are greatly diminishing costs, which our institutions hopefully will appreciate. We're also, if when we're talking about practicing law, we are saving time. So these are ways that we can translate what we're doing by saving time by working virtually and saving money to allow us to develop more at home. Another silver lining we heard of, we can see our students' faces. If we were teaching in person, we would have to be far away from them. They would have to be far away from one another, have their faces covered. Instead, we can meet with them in breakout rooms, and we can see them face to face in conferences and class. Welcome guest speakers. Have guest speakers from who are alumni of your school bring law into the classroom, and also have them bring the law to life for those who are who are with you. They don't have to travel. You don't have to host them. You don't have to take them out for a meal. Perhaps you can send them a paperweight or a flyer or a gift if you want, but they can bring the law into your classroom and teach your students about the law of other countries. We can travel without traveling by using Zoom. And then finally, I resisted putting this in a slide, but having heard the stories that Susan and others shared about humanizing your classroom, about the pets and the kids who show up in class, my final slide just shows you a slide that I shared with my students because this happened with my family during the pandemic. And as you can see, these two individuals are very excited about the law and about communicating online. So there they are. And with that, I will stop the share. They will not be present on the slides that I share for the program. But I hope that these links provide you with ideas for connecting and for continuing to innovate in ways that we can continue with after this pandemic is over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I love that last picture. I'll turn it over to Susan Bissam-Rapp, who is our next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cindy, and thanks, Diane. And I really love that last photograph. It made me so happy. So now I feel like I can begin. Let me just pull up my slides. And I need to just project them for you. There we go. And I may leave my camera on just for the heck of it. I think my internet connectivity is pretty good. Okay, so why is the title of my talk Finding Goldfields 2.0? The title of the talk is actually an update of an article I published over a decade ago that explored the goals and the challenges and the outcomes associated with teaching international and comparative employment law in a summer study abroad program in China in 2007. This was my first visit to the People's Republic of China. I had not taught law in a one-party state before. The class composition was cross-national. I had 10 Chinese law students and 15 American law students in my course. And I was really worried about minefields. I was really worried about topics like the illegality of independent trade unions in China or forced labor conditions in Myanmar, which is a close ally of China within its geographic sphere of influence. How was I going to be able to talk about those topics on Chinese soil? Ultimately, instead of minefields, I found gold fields. Teaching in China at the Guangha School of Law in Hangzhou was, at the time, one of the best teaching experiences of my career. And the title of the article I wrote, reflecting on the experience, became Fearing Minefields, but Finding Goldfields, Teaching International and Comparative Workplace Law in China or anyplace else. So the title of this talk is Finding Goldfields 2.0, and it harks back to that earlier article, and it signals that, like many of us today, I am updating my thinking about teaching abroad in light of the teaching experience that I had in the last academic year, and in particular, an experience I had in the fall of 2020, teaching in Italy from the safety of my home office, where in fact I am speaking to you now. I taught in Italy from the safety of my home office in San Diego, California, and I find that quite remarkable. The COVID-19 crisis and the technology that many of us have become adept at using is in fact the impetus for revising my thoughts about international legal education. So I want to begin thinking about a quote that I'm now embarrassed about. And here is a quote. This was the very last sentence of the article that I published in 2009 about my 2007 teaching experience. And here's the quote. Removing yourself from native soil, stepping into a classroom with students from another country can stretch your abilities, enabling you to achieve a depth and a balance in your teaching that may not have been possible had you stayed home. Now, when I look at that final sentence now, after a year in which travel abroad from the US ground to a complete halt, I feel a little embarrassed, and I'm not entirely sure why. Somehow it seems like a kind of frivolous statement to make. It sounds like an advertising pitch for academic tourism, which is certainly not what my intent was. But more importantly, in terms of transformation of my teaching and my thinking about teaching, instructing students during the pandemic, whether in the US or any place else, now ranks first in my book. The pandemic presented pedagogical challenges for all of us, unlike anything we had encountered before. COVID required us to deliberate about our teaching practices, consider our students' needs, which were incredibly great and very varied, and it required us to master technology as an essential tool in the effort. Yet, as Professor Nina Cohn noted in a recent article, law professors teaching online do not adapt to virtual classrooms without having instruction themselves. Law professors need training to learn to teach online well. And I was lucky to have really good training during the summer of 2020. So what I learned about teaching and technology in general served me really well when I taught a seminar from my home office to Italian PhD students in Modena, Italy during the fall 2020 academic term. Apart from the pandemic, though, I continue to believe that it's important and beneficial, especially for American law students, to develop global legal competency. While this statement may not receive a lot of disagreement in other countries, many people in the US Academy do disagree. Certainly not those who are gathered here today, but there are those in the American Legal Academy who feel that international instruction for American students is an unnecessary luxury. Professor Rosa Kim, in a 2018 Journal of Legal Education article, talked about the debate in American law schools about internationalizing the curriculum, and she noted that for a period in the early 2000s, there was a lot of momentum for developing the global legal competency of American law students, and this was evidenced by lots of academic conferences on the subject, some curriculum reform at American law schools, increasing enrollment of foreign LLM students at American law schools, and a proliferation of summer and semester study abroad programs. Professor Kim notes that global legal competency in American law schools was promoted in 3 different ways. First, through additive steps, the idea being that you would add many more international and comparative law courses to the law school curriculum. Secondly, through immersive programming. That involved creating study abroad programs that were either semesters abroad through cooperation agreements with law schools in other countries, or summer abroad programs. You'd fly your students over to a foreign destination for a summertime program. And third, through integrative steps. And that involved adding international material into traditional required American law courses. More recently, however, Professor Kim notes that progress in internationalizing the American law school curriculum and programming has stalled. A period in which law school applications dropped, poor employment prospects for students, at least at some law schools, high student debt associated with financing American legal education, all of these things refocus the attention of law school administrators on budget cutting, bar examination passage, and law school employability after graduation. And these are all important things to focus on. However, they came at the cost of the internationalization of at least some law school programming. Today, Professor Kim notes that only a tiny number of law schools have international law requirements as part of their American legal study program, and the number of students, American students in immersive programs, at least pre-pandemic, is estimated to be fairly low. Only about 10% of American law students take advantage of immersive programs that send them abroad for study for a period of time. Now, what Professor Kim notes resonates with my experience. In my field, American workplace law, there was a blossoming of interest in international and comparative study in the early 2000s. The field, however, was a real latecomer to the trend. When I first taught a seminar on international and comparative employment law in 2003, there was no casebook on the subject, and only about a dozen law schools had such an elective offering. The first American casebook on the subject was published in 2007. I'm one of the co-authors. A competing casebook appeared in 2008. And also in 2007, 3 small texts appeared that were add-ons to the traditional American electives in workplace law: labor law, employment discrimination, and employment law. Now, those of us who were arguing for a more international approach to workplace law in American law schools ultimately didn't sell our colleagues on this at all. My co-authors and I did get to publish a second edition of our textbook in 2012, but it did not sell well. And none of the other texts that I just mentioned published a second edition at all. Now, back to the gold fields. When I taught my international and comparative employment course in China, I had 3 goals in mind. First, to expose students to relevant international organizations, most importantly, the International Labor Organization in Geneva, its constitution, its declarations, its conventions, its recommendations, and its jurisprudence. Second, to teach law students how to engage in the comparative law process by setting 2 national legal systems side by side. For this particular course, I compared the US to China and examining the similarities and differences between them. And then finally, since all 25 of my students were studying law, albeit 2 different legal systems in 2 different countries, I wanted to create open-minded students who would function well in transnational legal practice. Additionally, in China, I faced 3 challenges. One was language related. I was teaching in English. My Chinese students were worried about their facility in English. They had trouble completing long reading assignments, and they had trouble with note-taking. Second was a pedagogical challenge, and that's because of different educational cultures in China and in the United States. In China, just like traditional legal education in Kenya and in many other places, education is produced through lecture, very little interaction, but that's not the way that we do it in the United States. We have Socratic dialogue, there's a lot of student engagement, and I was worried about getting the Chinese students involved. And finally, political. In China, there were some very touchy political issues that I had to very carefully plan in order to be able to discuss them openly in class. So I balanced whatever critiques I had of the Chinese system with very pointed critiques of the US system of labor and employment law. And in fact, the byproduct, I think, was a richer classroom experience and probably improved teaching on my part. So what happened in 2020 when I taught this past fall in Italy for a month? First, there were some differences between the seminar I taught in Italy and how I usually teach my international comparative employment law course. The course in Italy actually focused on the US. It was called 21st Century Challenges Facing American Workplace Law. There were some points of cross-national comparison, but the main focus was our flexible, messy, complicated system of workplace regulation and how it is faring and faltering before a number of challenges, including the rise of the gig and the platform economy and the COVID-19 pandemic. Second, there were no Americans in my classroom. Unlike my course in China, which had students from China and from the United States, my Italian seminar was taught to 20 PhD students who were in Italy while I was in California. And third, the PhD program is interdisciplinary. It's a PhD degree in labor development and innovation, and only a few of my 20 students had backgrounds in law or legal studies. Instead, they had degrees in engineering and sociology and economics and computer science. And that created new challenges compared with China, where everybody in the class knew something about law and legal systems. The Italian situation was a different kind of language problem. My PhD students' facility with English was actually incredibly strong, but their understanding of law and legal systems much less so. What made the seminar work was adhering, though, to the very same goals. Know exactly why you're teaching the course and what outcomes you hope the students will achieve at the end of the session. But the piece that pulled it together was the technology. And given the state of online education today, I'd say that the technology I used was current, but really hardly novel. There are really 5 technological guideposts that I kept in mind that helped me craft a seminar that effectively crossed borders. First, I taught synchronously, and I have found that synchronous online offerings really require no change in my teaching style at all. The University of Modena did not use Zoom. They used a web conferencing system called Big Blue Button, which is an awful lot of alliteration rather than Zoom, but once you know Zoom, it's easy to adapt to other platforms. The 9-hour time difference between the professor and the students was easily overcome. We began at 8 a.m. Pacific, which was 5 p.m. Central European. Second, and I think I'm going to end with just the second point instead of the other points I have since I'm out of time. I think it's really important when you're teaching internationally, or even when you're teaching online in the United States, to create an online universe. And I did that versus using the University of Modena's learning management system. I had used Canvas and Twen before. They used a different system. It didn't matter. I created and posted a clear syllabus, weekly readings. I emailed students questions in advance of class every day, things to think about during the week. I followed up with emails after class. I stayed online after class for office hours, and I was in their faces as much as one can be from a distance of 6,000 miles, which is close to 10,000 kilometers. So as we begin to enter our global post-pandemic period, I hope we're almost post-pandemic, I hope we can use our experiences with technological border crossing as a platform for renewing a commitment to developing global legal competence in our students and a depth and balance in our teaching, whether we're teaching students on foreign soil or from our home offices. Thanks very much. And I will stop the share.
Thank you, Susan. So Cindy Fountaine and I have agreed to switch back and forth on moderating the discussion portion. So if anybody has any questions or thoughts, feel free to raise your hand or even put something in chat. But I really enjoyed this last group of presentations. I thought all of them were phenomenal. Diane, I definitely want to get your slides so I can join all these organizations that I don't currently belong to. I think that's exciting. One of the things that I like about this last group of presentations in particular is that it does give rise to the question, how do we make sure that we benefit from what we've learned? There's a joke, one of the 3 dad jokes that I tell my kids all the time about a group of chickens that went to a seminar and learned how to fly. And on the way home, as they were walking home, they all talked about what a great seminar it had been. And I worry sometimes that we have these great experiences, we learn these wonderful things, and then we put them away in a drawer somewhere and never do them again. So thanks to those of you who really addressed those points about the importance of moving forward and keeping the gains that we've made. So I see 2 questions here. So let's start with Colleen and then Diane, if that's okay.
Yes, and thank you, Chris. And actually, I'm pulling both together because Diane, you were mentioning that the International Legal Education Abroad group are meeting. And Susan, you mentioned how there is sort of a look down on studying abroad, that somehow it's something that you do as an undergraduate, but for law school, you know, we're beyond that now. And I'm just wondering how, you know, what's the current thinking on trying to change the views of law schools and hiring firms about that? And is it coming up at the conference? And also, Susan, what what sort of things do you do to try and change that mindset? Thank you.
Well, to answer your question, and then I'll do mine later. There's there's strong all over this nation support for legal education abroad. And this group that's meeting this week is the meeting, there's probably about 50 people or so present. It's been meeting for about a dozen years. But if you go to the ABA website where it lists programs abroad, you'll see there's a couple of types. One is summer abroad programs, which were all canceled last summer. There might have been one that was still held, I'm not sure. Then there's schools that have their own programs abroad during the academic year. And then there's schools like ours, which the ABA permits you to earn up to a third of your credits somewhere else. So that's why you can visit out a domestic institution, but you can also do that abroad. And so, for example, we've had almost 40 students over the past dozen years earn an LLM abroad during their third year that counts toward the JD. Right now, all of the schools, both graduate and undergraduate, are going through what the heck is the government and our universities going to let us do in the fall? Will we let students go abroad? And if so, what kinds of different what kinds of different regulations or waivers or whatever will be in place? But if you were to be at that other meeting these 3 afternoons, there's plenty of programs that are going to go abroad. And there's also so many students. They're working out all kinds of plans for LLM students, both to be able to learn in person or remotely. Bill Adams, who is high up in the ABA's section on legal education and admission to the bar, spoke also about how the ABA is thinking about reconceiving what it thinks of as distance education. And he spoke about this yesterday because there were all kinds of waivers granted to schools this year who were bringing in international students for LLM and other programs. And a lot of that is going to continue, but they're starting to rethink this, which is really great. And in terms of international legal education, the ABA has been very flexible over the past dozen or more years that I've worked with those programs. They used to regulate how many students you could send abroad each year. And now they say, it's up to the law school. We're not going to worry about that. So there's a lot going on there. And I'm more than happy to talk to you outside this conference or to share with anybody, to communicate with any of you about these kinds of developments.
Yeah.
Susan, if you could add your thoughts on that too. Yeah.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you. I have found that there are wonderful international and also national networks that we can all tap into, just as Diane said. I want to shift the focus a little to advocating within your home institution. At different points at my law school, I have had deans who were more or less favorably disposed to our international programming. Our current dean is favorably disposed. A couple of deans ago, less so. And so I would like to encourage everyone to think about advocating throughout their home institution. So for example, one key person you need to talk to would be the associate or assistant dean in charge of career services, because students will go to that individual and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing the summer abroad program in China, or we also have one in Nice, France. And if the career services guru says, that's a mistake, you should really be somewhere in California, California, working at a law firm, working for the DA's office, working for the public defender, getting that really great experience, spending a whole summer working full time, then that person will undercut the efforts to internationalize the curriculum. One of the things we did at our school was to try to schedule the summer program super early in May in China for two reasons. First of all, it gets too darn hot, and not all the classrooms are air conditioned in China. And secondly, we were able to pitch the program as accommodating students who wanted to come back from 3 weeks in China and then work all summer at a law firm in California or elsewhere in the United States. But we needed to sort of strategize about how to counter how various important people who counsel our students feel about our international programming as well.
Thanks. I think that's a great point. Having been in a situation counseling students and so forth, thinking about the consequences and understanding the benefits is very important. Susan, I think, or Diane, you had a question, and then is it Ira? Do you have a question? You came. It looked like you might have had one. I'm not sure. Okay, Diane, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I can't agree with Susan more. Absolutely find people to advocate with, whether it's people in your university's international studies, overseas programs, and certainly people at the law school. I've had to deal with some of the same issues with career counseling. One of the best ways to counter this is to get the statements of your students who have gone abroad. I could go on and on and on if we had time about the life-changing experiences that these students had, and they are the best advertisement. When you put up your alum who is with a major law firm doing global data privacy in London, or who is working for an Australian law firm in China, they sell it better than anything else. The thing I had raised my hand about too was that there's great ways of integrating international issues into your courses. One of the things Rosa talks about in her article that Susan was mentioning, and that I've done for years, is integrate international legal issues into my legal writing courses, so that to confer the point that it doesn't matter whether you never leave California or Pennsylvania or wherever, you will always encounter international issues, whether you have a client abroad, someone who gets in trouble with the law abroad, someone wants to buy property in the US from abroad or whatever. And I know that we'd be happy to share those kinds of problems with you. McGeorge Law School also has a great series on companion books for bringing international legal issues into your classrooms for other courses.
Thanks, Diane. We want to keep the trains running on time. So I think we have time for one more question or comment before we move on to the next session. Does anybody else have something that they'd like to add? Let me mention one thing. I'm going to give some props to Cindy Fountaine, who was our dean here for a number of years. We started a program called Legal Globalization and Comparative Law. One of the things that we had to deal with as a relatively small school with not many resources, it's very difficult to have an ABA approved study abroad program. It's expensive for the students, it's expensive for the school. And so she developed, along with one of our colleagues at the time, this program where you spend a semester studying the legal system of another country, and then you will travel there for 10 to 14 days, either during the semester or at the end of the semester. We have found that to be remarkably cost effective for our students. It's about half the cost of a typical study abroad program. And we have had these programs take place in Germany. Cindy has done one in Germany several times, Australia, Botswana, and South Africa. And we've also had one in Cuba, because our university has a State Department educational license for students to travel to Cuba. So we've had some wonderful experiences with our students, kind of on the cheap, but also a good way to have an international presence if you don't have the resources to go the full ABA route. So with that, I think we're at time to start our next session. And it looks like Colleen, you're up.